Okay, this is the Kubernetes cluster lifecycle special interest group on Tuesday, the 20th of June, 2017. At least I think that's the date. So let's just crack on with the agenda. Robert, you've got some 1.7 release blockers.
Sure. Yeah, so there are 3 open issues. There were 2 last night, but 1 PR got reverted, so now we're back to 3. There are 2 issues in the main repository. The first of which is about the IP mask agent. I'm chatting with Daniel about that right now, trying to get that fixed. I'm guessing that'll get fixed today. The second one is an upgrade test failure, which a number of people are working on. Dawn herself was working on that yesterday, so I'm not too concerned about that one. And the third one is in the kubeadmin repo, which is for documentation for upgrading a non-self-hosted kubeadmin cluster. I just wanted to highlight the fact that these things are being tracked by the release team. The release candidate is scheduled to be cut tomorrow, June 21st, and the final build is scheduled for next Wednesday. It's not clear to me whether or not we're on track. There was some discussion yesterday about postponing that slightly, but we do need to make sure we burn down our issues here. So like I said, the first 2, I believe, are under control, and this last one we need to take care of. So I'll transition with that to Jacob for the next line item, which is about that last issue.
Yep. So there's a PR out for this. I've gotten a bit of feedback and addressed it. I'm really looking for hopefully more people to actually test the instructions. So I've created pre-release RPMs and debs, and they're hosting Google Cloud Storage, their instructions on how to fetch them. So across different distributions and maybe different point releases of 1.6, it'd be great if people actually exercised the instructions and made sure that they worked. And otherwise, take a look at them from a technical perspective, make sure they make sense, and let's get the instructions checked in, even if we have to iterate on them more.
I think that sounds good. I think we're on track. I talked to SIG release yesterday, Dawn and Chow, I think. Basically, there's 1 PR still that's going to be merged today. Basically saying that kubeadm should default to stable 1.7 instead of stable 1.6. It's the thing. We can link the PR number, and it's going to be hand merged or hand merged or by the submit queue in any hour now. So I think that's on track as well. Last time I tested the upgrade instructions, they worked well. So it would be cool to have others as well test, as Jacob said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess we should probably just set a deadline for that. And if it's working for the people who have tested it, we should just merge the documentation and call it done. We can't wait forever for a large number of people to test. So if you are willing to test, please do so sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I added to the meeting notes 1 PR in the Kubernetes repo, and I just removed the do not merge label, so it's going to be merged any hour now. And cool. The reason, yeah, go ahead.
All I was going to say is, if some people have tested that these instructions work, and they do, then I'm comfortable with it going in, and then people should test it as well. Anyone else who's willing to test it should also test it. And if there are any issues, we can do follow-up PRs.
Is it targeted for the 1.7 branch? Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'll do a quick pass this evening as well to make sure, and then I can give my LGTM and we can get it in, I think.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome, thank you for working on that, Jacob.
No worries.
Cool. Lucas, do you want to take us through the E2E tests?
Yeah, sure. So thanks to Jacob's work with the test infra stuff PRs last week, we're back green on all the tests the job suite we have. which is great. It's been a couple of weeks since we saw some green lights there.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Thanks. I'm still. If we could make some documentation on how to like write these. I understand more and more every time I review Jacob's PRs. But still, it would be nice to have a how to add your job suit to the test grid kind of thing.
Sure, yeah, and I've been thinking about hosting a session of anyone who's interested in learning, just because that's a little bit cheaper from my time perspective. I can do Q&A and code walkthrough and things like that. A lot of that, though, is that the test infra keeps changing. They keep adding more layers. They keep completely refactoring everything and changing things to scenarios, to other files, so I can barely keep up with it as well. Every time they break, I have to go in and relearn everything from scratch. So that's something I've been pushing on their team, is to document the different layers and why they exist. So it's not just our SIG's issue. I guarantee you, I think it's something everyone struggles with.
Yeah, and I think that was the problem. Like the latest week has been failing because of that refactoring. So that's basically, we have a couple of issues in the Kubernetes repo that would be cool to get fixed. A pre-submit job, Jacob has a PR for that one, which I think is going to be merged today. Or
yeah, I think that's good to go now. Now with the 1.8.0 Alpha 1 released and our master CI back to green, I think we can re-enable the pre-submit.
Yeah, but is it for every PR or for CMD Kubernetes ones?
It's a good question. I think it's for every PR, but I wrote that a while ago and marked it do not merge. So let me refresh myself on that.
Yeah, I think we could initially have it for CMD Kubernetes, and I mean, I expect this cycle to have pretty much a couple of PRs at any given point in time. So if anything else is starting to block that by when if someone else makes a change that breaks Kubernetes, but it wasn't noticed in the pre-submit test, we'll at least notice them in our Kubernetes related pre-submit tests, and that way get notified about it. So I think it makes sense to at least gate them for only our PRs initially.
Makes sense.
Then we have to test the version 1.6 control plane from the Kubernetes 1.7 binary, and that's PR for that one too. Thank you. Then use images from head instead of from latest TXT. So basically now we're using the latest alpha or beta version of Kubernetes that's released, but this means we are behind at least or maximum 2.5 weeks or something from master, and that's not optimal. It would be great to use the latest images, and as Robert said and pointed out in the issue, it's a long-standing thing. I created an issue in December for this, but there hasn't been enough resources, like human working resources to implement it just. So, I mean, that would be an awesome thing to contribute from our side as well. It isn't that hard. I mean, I checked the code and maybe 30, 40 lines, well placed. But anyway, an effort that somebody's got to take on. And so that would be cool. Then we should verify that the node authorizer is working. this should ideally be an E2E test, gated by an auth, so we can focus on Ginkgo to test that. But does SIG-auth have plans to? Is there anyone from SIG-auth here?
Yeah. 1 second. Hi. So is the node authorizer not already on for the EDE alpha channels?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It would be really nice if it is.
Yeah, I can go and investigate that. I think that the node authorizer work was blocked on the TLS, parts of the TLS bootstrapping stuff being on by default for the EDE tests, because you need to have sort of unique credentials on each node in order for the node authorizer to work. I can bring that up in SIG-auth, and I think that that's a more appropriate SIG to own some of this.
Yeah, I agree. I think I might have linked in the issue there as well. I have a root issue for it in Kubernetes. I assigned it to Jordan.
Yeah.
Already, but
if he doesn't have plans to do that, I can take that on.
Yeah, exactly. I just assigned without to triage more than implement.
Okay.
But if somebody could take that on, it would be really cool. I mean, we are one consumer of it, and it would be cool to just make sure we don't break anything.
Yeah, definitely.
Somehow. Yeah.
It is still alpha, to the best of my knowledge, though, unless you don't need to turn on. I don't know if it's feature flagged off for this release, but I was under the impression it was.
I thought it went directly to beta.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure when you're saying now, but that was my understanding.
Okay, I can look into that then.
Cool. Then we have verifying that the 1.6 to 1.7 upgrade is working. I don't think this should be a release blocker, but nearly, because it's kind of crucial that when we provide an upgrade part, it should work. And I mean, for now, well, we're testing manually, like Jacob, me, and others. But just having something to spin up a kubeadm cluster with 1.6, then just do the same thing just run this kubeadm init command with 1.7 client, and then run conformance tests. That's like enough. But it would be great to get it automated as soon as possible. But might be hard. Then we have an easier one that we should make an SIG-cluster-lifecycle tab or kubeadm tab or something. I don't know, Justin, does COPS have already its own, or?
Its own tab, you mean?
Yeah.
It currently had, we need to reorganize it because COPS is adding support for GCE. So like all the AWS tests are COPS, but that is not what we want it to be, right?
There's also a separate sort of conflated issue, which Lucas and I were chatting about in one of the issues, which is it's one thing to sort of use a deployment tool to run the various EDE tests against a provider, like you're using COPS to run an AWS test. But we also, if we make like a kubeadmin tab, we want to use that to test variations of kubeadmin itself, not just to run tests on a provider using kubeadmin, right? So those are sort of two different variants. I think if we have a kubeadmin tab, it's really to test a variation in kubeadmin. And like we might use kubeadmin or COPS or something to run the tests against other platforms. And then I've been chatting with Eric Feda from the Inchprod team about making like a dashboard for our SIG. So like a SIG cluster lifecycle dashboard. Because right now, if you look at test grid, it's sort of this huge mangled mess. Like you don't even know where to start. You don't know where to look for tests. And if each SIG had a place where like, here's your landing page, go look here, this is where you triage test failures, it would be really, really helpful. So this is sort of conflated with that. I think it's like we should definitely just make a kubeadmin tab and get ourselves out of MISC, because it always takes me like 5 minutes to remember that we're under MISC and where to find our tests. But sort of in the longer term, we should be reorganizing the test grid as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that was the six points I had about that.
And I've gone ahead and added the help
Yeah.
wanted label to all the ones that are not currently under being worked on. So
yeah, sounds good. Yeah, feel free to take the next one.
All right, so I wanted to give, I think last week during the Tuesday meeting, it was really helpful to do like a very brief recap of the breakout meeting that had happened the Friday before for people who weren't able to attend. So I was going to do that again, trying to keep it under about 5 minutes or so for people who weren't there and don't want or don't have time to watch the video. One thing I will start with is we forgot to record attendance, which Lucas pointed out. So I threw some names in there of people I knew who were there, but if you were there on Friday, please go back and add your name retroactively. So in terms of what we started with a doc that Fabrianzo had put together about sort of which configurations of cubeadmin we want to support, whether it's single node, multi-node with a single master, or multi-node with multiple masters, and sort of talked through different iterations of upgrade paths from each of those and deployment paths and where we want to start. That doc has been made commentable for everyone. So I was reading through it again last night and was frustrated that I couldn't add comments, but I'm going to do that now. So people can go take a look at that. We also talked about daemon sets versus deployments for master components. CoreOS uses deployments mainly to support single node self-hosted masters. And we talked about asking the SIG apps group to create like a rollout policy for daemon sets so we could change the rollout configuration, because the main reason for using deployments is that you can have two deployments of the two instances of like the controller manager pod on the single node master, whereas with a daemon set, you'll kill yourself and never recreate yourself. We talked about checkpointing and sort of came to a nominal agreement that we'd like to ask SIG node to add checkpointing, either probably from their side doing reviews and for us implementing via an alpha annotation on pods. So you add an alpha annotation to the master component pods, and those will get checkpointed by the kubelet, so we don't have to run an out-of-band checkpointer. CoreOS pointed out that this is only useful for them if we also checkpoint secrets. So I think we will try to push that also. We may make that a separate annotation, or we may sort of bundle that in with the alpha annotation and revisit later. But I think for the initial version, we'll definitely want to checkpoint secrets so we can get everybody on the same page using the same checkpointing code. And then so as a result, there were a number of action items that came out at the end. If you look at the end of the meeting notes, I'm going to talk to SIG apps about the daemon set upgrades. Timothy is going to start creating the checkpointing proposal, which a bunch of people are going to jump in and flush out so we can give it to SIG node. And then Lucas has upgraded the checklist for self-hosted cubeadmin. Sweet, that was like 2.5 minutes, so definitely under the 5 minutes. Anything else people who were there want to chime in with? Awesome. All right, let's keep moving.
Cool. Thank you very much for that summary. That's super useful. So Lucas, bootstrap tokens to beta.
Yeah, so this might be a topic for next week in more detail, but Joe, Nathan, let me see, Macaulay, and me and Eric talked about bootstrap tokens and a security flow with man in the middle. That's possible to do now. If one token is compromised, you can set up a man in the middle API server kind of thing that makes you so the client, when you kubeadm join, you can it's possible to join a master that isn't secure, that's someone else has set up. So that's why it's good to be in alpha still, to not have that security flaw in it. But basically, on in SIG-auth, the SIG-auth Slack channel, we're discussing how to fix this issue, how to mitigate it. It's not a huge thing. It's basically you have to get one token have to be compromised, and then it opens up things. But still, we want to lock things down, even if a token was compromised at some point. So, and probably it's going to be varying, like different tokens. You have a couple of alternatives. So you can use the really secure token, which is longer, or you use the less secure token, which is shorter, or you just copy the file out of band. So, which is the most secure alternative, of course. So there will be a couple of alternatives, but I think we'll go into this in more detail next week when I think Joe is on a plane, he said, and Nathan couldn't make it either. So yeah, that's for next week.
One other flow that we should consider that we've been looking into on the GCE side, and I know that AWS supports the same thing, is using like the signing attributes of the virtual machine infrastructure to do this as well, right? Instead of pre-distributing a shared key, we can use sort of the PKI infrastructure built into the underlying cloud platform to prove identity also.
Does GCE have, so the problem with that on AWS is you only get like a pre-signed token, and you don't get like the ability to sign something on the fly. So it's sort of like a one-use bearer token. And like I think the way Vault does it is once it is burned like the minute you use it. So it's like it's a race to see who gets it first. And the theory is the init process will get it first because then anyone else can also read it, but it will be worthless after first use.
Interesting. So it's sort of a one-time use thing is what you're saying?
That's how they make it tolerably secure in Vault to Vault standards.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe that's not useful then. It just
does GCE have something better, or
I have no idea if it's better than that or not. That's a good question.
I dream of a world where GCE can sign something saying that yes, you are that machine or that instance ID.
And Lucas, by the way, the current proposal doesn't really cover a lot of these type of attestation things where you would have, a node signing for something. So is that in the roadmap? I know I've asked that on the actual form, but I'm a little confused about that being absent. It seems like the bootstrap token is supposed to be used sort of as your form of authentication and credentials for the cluster.
Yeah, so the problem maybe, I guess we should just write yet another doc for that is more Kubernetes specific, because this proposal for bootstrap tokens is more for the validation of the master from the node side, and not as much the TLS bootstrapping, which is like when I actually authenticate to the master and get my things signed. So we're using both TLS bootstrapping. We're using the same token for both the bootstrap token validation flow and TLS bootstrapping. So yeah, I know. Yeah, the best thing would probably be to write a doc with that's Kubernetes, or not Kubernetes specific, but how do I combine these two features in a way that's pretty secure, at least.
We at least will be covering the TLS bootstrapping side in BootKube, not the discovery of your CA and establishing secure connections from the worker to having the worker trust the master. So we can probably just share those docs and compare notes if that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. We should. I'll ping in SIG-cluster-lifecycle and maybe SIG-auth as well when I have something written up.
Cool. Yeah, so we can talk about this more next week when we have, I think, Nathan on. Yeah.
Yep. So then one thing we have to figure out somehow is when we're aiming for an AJ Vault and we want a new certificate for an API server, we want to add a new one. We have to somehow generate a serving certificate for the new API server we've got, and which includes the right host name and IP address or whatever that's that it has to include. So then we have to get some mechanism to get that to sign that certificate and like distribute it to the right place. So one possible solution would be to basically use the same mechanism for API servers as we use for the kubelets, and maybe just so we could use most of the same mechanism there, not everything, but basically the kubeadm, for example, could create a CSR with the right specs, and then the CSR or the approver could approve only if it's from a certain, if it has this RBAC binding, which is the way Mike implemented the CSR approver right now. I think it's a dynamic rule that you can, if you add this rule, it will approve all CSRs of a specific kind, and that way we could get automatic API server certs, which is individual, and maybe use the certificate rotation stuff Jacob Simpson is working on for the kubelet. Reuse some of that as well. But I don't know, what is it something we could think about, or?
So we're considering using sort of a similar policy for self-hosted etcds to ensure that they have unique TLS certificates when they go ahead and talk to one another, so that the peer communications inside of the self-hosted cluster for the etcd cluster created by the etcd operator that is sort of self-hosted and running everything is properly secured. I don't know if the approvers today are expressive enough to sort of say, if you come in with a service account and you are this expected service account and you're requesting only for these type of SANs, that we're going to let you do that. So I think that any step forward that we are going to take with that in the coming in soon would be something that we would probably have to roll our own approver. So maybe those are notes that we can go take back to Mike Denise and have him sort of improve the current thing. But we are sort of thinking about that and using the CSR endpoints for that. I don't see why that couldn't extend to API servers as well.
What does Mike, are you on the call? Well,
I'm on a pretty bad internet connection, but that sounds very reasonable to me. I think there's talk about pod identity, so we should, once that is developed, we should try to be as much an extension of pod identity when we authenticate against API servers. etcd is slightly different than the API servers because the API servers are behind a service, but that's all something we have to work out. Happy to go over any notes, Eric, once you have them.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Then if it sounds at least somehow within scope for a SIG, I'll go ahead and write something a little bit longer than 3 sentences. And we can work on it as a cross-cutting effort between SIG-auth and SIG-cluster-lifecycle. I think it's pretty easily achievable, but we'll see.
Cool. So what's next on the agenda?
new contribution ideas for the week. I thought, as part of the Contribex thing we talked about last week, it would be cool to highlight a couple, like from 3 to 7 things or something on each meeting that would be helpful for us, that we don't necessarily have the resources to implement for the coming 2 weeks or something. That would be really helpful to our SIG. So here are six alternatives.
How did you label those, out of curiosity, Lucas? Like, how is anyone coming to the repo able to understand and find them, that these are useful things to contribute to?
I've started adding the help wanted label to them as I find them.
The Brian Grant "we shall not use help wanted" label.
All over the place.
All right.
Is there a better label we can use?
That's fine by me. I don't care. So as long as we're in agreement.
It's our repo, right? We can use whatever label we want.
Exactly. So they are marked help wanted, at least for now, until we have something better. So a quick comment on them. Kubernetes validate would be cool to have something. I mean, running EDA tests right now or just smoke tests is a pain. You have to download things from a GCS bucket somewhere or compile yourself. Then you have to set up some different credential stuff and invoke the large binary with 5 different command line flags. Otherwise, it won't work. So a Kubernetes validate conformance or some kind of such a command would be really cool would be really cool user experience to make sure I have a conformant cluster, or just Kubernetes validate networking. I mean, there's a lot of people that report issues with DNS or just this DNS resolution doesn't work. This flannel IP mask configuration doesn't work, which I saw recently today, and then we could spot these issues. What's actually the problem with such a command, and have like five different outputs, and then we could have a verbose mode or something so Kubernetes actually says or informs us what the problem is, instead of relying on the user, the reporter, to provide that information. Would probably help our issue hygiene as well, to get things tried faster.
If I step back to the phase pre-flight, there's been a little bantering back and forth about node conformance and potentially did you add any notes to that for the pre-flight checks?
Well, do you mean the system verification?
Yeah,
thing?
Before, as part of a pre-flight thing, right?
Yeah, so it's since 1.6 at least. Yeah, I think since 1.6, Kubernetes is running the system verification test in pre-flight checks. Yes, basically it checks kernel version, Docker version, a lot of kernel parameter, what is it called, kernel config statements and such things. So what was the question? Sorry, I didn't.
I thought node conformance was more than that. I thought there was a series of tests. It's been a while since I've looked at it, so the conversation was to subsume pieces or use it as a library to invoke directly as part of the pre-flight checks in kubeadm, so that way there's less room for error, right, from the user side. Yeah.
So I think this is lightweight, yeah, for sure. It takes 3-4 seconds to do. I think what you're talking about was something heavier. That takes at least like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I don't know.
I don't think we need to do all of them. We could take a subset of the most rational ones that would prevent the most amount of errors.
Yeah. So, yeah, that would be a good contribution as well, probably. So first, hash out which are the relevant ones, and then implement. Yeah, so kubeadm validate. We can have kubeadm validate node as well to invoke all of these node validation tests from that is a SIG output from SIG node. Then kubeadm phase preflight. This is mostly about making preflight checks invocable separately. So it's basically adding a command and hooking that command up to the preflight package. Then preflight check for bad etc resolve conf. There have been a lot of users that have reported issues with kubeadm recently. That is where they have local-host defined in etc hosts or resolve conf to something like a strange IP somewhere. That is coming from the VPS provider or something, I don't know. And in that case, Kubernetes 1.6 fails because it's trying to resolve that, or it's trying to call that IP somewhere that isn't reachable, and kubeadm init hangs. So
that sounds like a low-hanging fruit issue, maybe, for new contributors.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's on the list.
That one has been fixed in 1.7, the localhost resolution, but for checking for a bad result.conf, you could certainly do that.
Yeah. It's I asked in SIG API machinery today, and they pointed me to the PR, which is great. That's fixed. But anyway, I don't know. Andy, do you think we'll experience other issues with such a configuration?
I don't know what might happen. I suppose there could be other things that could get tripped up with localhost resolving to something other than 127.
Yeah. So something that could be of help to contribute. Use images from head. Yes, we talked about that one. And the node authorizer and making the tab to for kubeadm. I mean, we could pin it in our channel or whatever. So then just to recap from last week as well, do we, as a SIG, endorse the daemon set approach with the right update strategy? I mean, can we get this was a conclusion from Friday. Can we just say this is the way we can go?
I thought Robert was going to talk with SIG apps first about the update strategy first before we make a yay or nay.
We're going to try to get buy-in from them that they'll actually build it for us. Otherwise, if we commit to it and they don't build it, then we're kind of stuck.
Either that, we could always build it, but we need sign off from Eric Toon. Unless Mike Denise could magically wave his hands, all would be good.
I think we can work around even if they don't sign up for it. The only thing, I don't know if it's more fragile or not, but hypothetically we could detect the single master or single node case and then just spawn a deployment with a controller manager that would, for a very short period in time, do the right scheduling controller manager, run the controller manager loops, and then remove it right after the daemon set upgrade. So, yeah.
We could either one-shot or daemon set is basically what you're saying, right?
Yeah, that we could work around it in the kubeadm upgrade command, like controller that does it. But I think it will be possible for SIG apps to do it, because it's generally a feature I assume people would like to have. But in like worst case scenario, I think we will be able to just work around it pretty easily. So yeah, but if everyone is happy then with a daemon set, I mean, Justin, are you here? Yes, so when not last Friday, but the Friday before, we talked about it, and you said that it was what Copt is doing, right? Or
we are getting there. Yeah, it's certainly the configuration we are running in terms of like having those things running on every master. Yes, rather than the deployment where they sort of float a little bit more.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know. Do we have consensus or not to proceed with that one, at least for the time, for the moment?
Any objections? Okay. Does anyone have any feelings about it?
Lots of silence.
Cool. Then I think the outcome of last Friday was to enable the alpha checkpointing mechanism in the kubelet. I guess we have consensus there as well to work on that as a group.
Yes.
Cool.
Yep. I think it's a good idea.
Then another one that has been discussed back and forth is using secrets for storing the certificates in a self-hosted cluster. And there's been between using secrets or some custom TPR method. But I think we should use secrets. And as Joe pointed out, well, because it's core and a native feature. Otherwise, we have to hack around with, I don't know, TempFS mounting and a lot of such things. But as Joe said somewhere on Slack maybe, or in an issue, we might yet have a TPR custom type with a certificate that can serve as an encryption key for those secrets. But I don't know how fancy we want to get. Basically, well, the drawback with the current secret approach is that all ingress controllers, or at least the most of them, just bind a cluster row with get secrets, which means they'll have access to everything, which is not ideal. You can just hack your ingress controller and you have root access to the whole cluster. Or federation controller also has access to all secrets and whatever user applications that don't care to use a role and be like specific about what namespace I'm going to use or such things can. I mean, it's totally possible that they just have a cluster role with all the resources, and I want to get secrets. Okay, then it's in my configuration, and suddenly I have access to everything, which is not what we want. So that's a drawback, but I think the latest discussions around this has leaned towards using that method anyway, and then maybe getting fancy with some extra security layers. So do we have consensus around this one?
Is there a SIG-auth meeting today? I mean, I think we can come to our own agreement here, but I think we need buy-in from SIG-auth on how to proceed. No, I know Eric's on the call, but I don't know.
We've already discussed this pretty much at length, and they have too, where it was deemed no worse than what is done today, but no better. There are benefits to using TPRs from a security perspective because you can quarantine who has access to that area a little bit better than kube system because there will be less people accessing it or less actors. But there's still the general discomfort that exists. But I think Lucas and I chatted on Slack saying that we can always upgrade into an official strategy if we want to. And this, for the time being, is no worse than what we are doing today. It's slightly worse, I guess, if you're strictly a security person. But
yeah, I mean, it feels like this is the next thing that will get fixed, right? The ingress controller should not have access to every secret in the system. It should only have access to the ones that have been tagged as like certs and keys. And that will get fixed, I am sure. And I don't think we should work around something that's going to get fixed, right?
I agree.
And also this was pending most of the whole 1.7 cycle. So we should like try to...
I think we should probably create like a checklist that says "quote unquote" production ready, because we put that clause at the top of kubeadm, and eventually once we have SIG-auth and other folks have an answer that they'd like to pursue, we could eventually have that as part of the checklist. But I think, we could always put the disclaimer that says at the beginning of kubeadm that these are the things these are our known knowns that exist, and go with God on the other stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not production ready. I think it's depending on what you're using it for in production, right? If you are trying to strongly isolate your cluster administrators from your cluster users, then maybe it's not production ready. But if they're one in the same group of people, then it's not actually not that bad because those people already have access anyway.
Sure. So we can change, we can massage the wording into something that we all agree upon. Yeah.
I don't even think it's a kubeadm limitation. I think there's a Kubernetes threat model that continually evolves, and I think it'd be great to write that down and what our weaknesses are and what is multi-tenancy safe right now? Probably, but we should write down paper. And we should write down where it falls down and what needs to happen before those things are safe, right?
There is that work is actually ongoing in terms of writing that down. I know Clayton Coleman had a PR open for the community repo, sort of detailing threat models. So I can drop that in the actual PR. I can drop that in the doc somewhere.
Does anyone object to Tim's stance that we should say this is basically no worse than what we have today? Let's move forward and go with it. Can we sort of propose that as the official SIG stance at this point? I'm hearing no objections, so I'm going to take silence as consent there. Okay.
Cool, great.
That seems reasonable, just so I understand. I mean, it means that we can proceed with self-hosting because we're not storing the secrets on the disk anymore. We're storing them in etcd, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly unblocks us. I mean, we could probably find a workaround if this was not the position we wanted to take, but I think this makes our life easier, and I don't think we don't believe it makes things significantly worse from a security point of view.
Sounds fine by me then.
Yeah, this really unblocks us, and the PR can be rebased and merged pretty soon when code freeze lifts. Then just a clarification that we said in the first special effort kind of meeting that self-hosting for 1.8 at least means self-hosting for control plane components, cluster add-ons like kubeproxy and DNS, and hopefully etcd. I don't know. I think etcd will decide that later in the cycle when we have a better idea whether we should use the operator and self-host it, or just, well, go with some other thing. I don't know.
Could we allow the prototyping to exist in an alpha stage, so that way we don't keep them blocked forever?
Yeah.
And if we decide to drop it or go some other route, we have the ability to do so. Because I don't want to keep folks blocked rebasing PRs.
Yeah. I hope that sounds reasonable, but at least not the kubelet. And what is the? Yeah, so exactly. There is a proposal that Robert, I think, linked.
Yeah, Brandon Phillips wrote up a little while back sort of the definition of self-hosted for Kubernetes. And basically what we're proposing is building a 1 to 4 self-hosted system, which is etcd and up, but not the kubelet. Or if we decide we can't make etcd itself self-hosted, it's a 2 to 4 self-hosted system. So I think in terms of terminology, if we're trying to explain this to other people, that's probably a good way to do it and reference back to this document. I think that's how Brian's sort of been handling the communication around this. So.
Cool.
What it's worth, internally, we've kind of always thought that we would need to allow both, like that, self-hosted etcd is an option, but bring your own is always going to be something people are going to want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I guess the question for kubeadmin is, what is the default, right? Is it a default self-hosted etcd, and then you can opt out of that with your own? Or is it a default, like, we don't think that self-hosted is quite working, so we're not going to do that as a default yet?
Right. So we were going to switch to it being on by default in Bootkube as soon as the TLS stuff for self-hosted etcd starts landing. And that's pretty soon. There's open PRs for that right now.
We can use E to E as the signal to determine that, right? We shouldn't change. Like, it bothers me that, like, in COPS we have like all these networking providers and people ask us like, which one should we use? And I'm like, I don't know, but if you found the one that works, don't switch, right? Like, I would like to have better like a scientific answer on that.
All right, we only have 5 minutes left. Lucas, you and Aaron put the same issue next, so I deleted yours and left Aaron's in.
Cool. Yep.
Yeah. So one of the things we were looking into is as a potential internship project for the 1.8 timeframe was looking into the API server count / API server endpoint issue. And kind of wanted to gauge the possibility of doing that, and if there's, kind of figuring out a scope of a solution, that might fit into the 1.8 timeframe, because there's some changes that we could do that are very long term, and there's some other changes that just might be better behavior, in the near term. I think the plan that Ifan and Abhinav were going to move forward with was to bring this up in API machinery, but it kind of affects us as well. So it's, at this point, it's a little bit exploratory. Like, does this seem like, I know we've wanted this resolved for a while, and I think other people have as well. So just kind of reaching out to see, what people think about that.
So when I was working on OpenShift, we actually implemented this in OpenShift and swapped out the default implementation that Kubernetes has. So it does use the etcd v2 TTL implementation. And I know that was something that, I don't remember who it was, but somebody from CoreOS didn't think that was a good idea because of changes coming in with etcd 3. But there is an implementation that is fairly minimal that basically solves the issue at hand. Although I know Jordan Liggett recently had posted that he would find it useful to have a fuller definition to what is an API server, what features does it support, what endpoints does it have, which I think is reasonable. But if somebody is looking for kind of a quick and dirty solution, what was written for OpenShift could work, as long as you at least use that in the etcd v2 mode.
Well, not necessarily, I guess, quick and dirty, more if it's something that we think is like the next 8 to 10 weeks, do we think that, the scope of it is something that's one release cycle kind of thing, no like major, changes in behaviors or anything like that. So
I would think so. I think that it would be useful to have some additional discussion on what sort of functionality we want, brainstorm around what Jordan was suggesting. And if we can come to some sort of relatively small consensus, I think it would be a good thing that an intern could work on.
Okay, cool. So do you think that API machinery is kind of the place to start that discussion?
This one crosses SIGs because it's kind of a little control plane and a little bit maybe networking if you at least put endpoints under the networking aspect. So I'm not sure exactly.
Anyone else have some thoughts about best way to kind of bring this up and get next steps?
I would think it definitely impacts API machinery heavily, particularly if we start to get like on some of the future ideas around like, you know, storing status via gossip or something like that, right? Like some of the really crazy stuff. So I would certainly start in API machinery. And
yeah, I do think that makes sense because Jordan and Clayton are usually in there, and Stefan and David Eads as well. So the group of people that's in API machinery is representative of the group that would be wanting to weigh in with opinions on this.
Okay, cool. So we'll go to that meeting, and then we'll just make sure to start reporting back here on kind of status about that.
Cool, sounds good.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the proposal would be nice.
Yeah, I'm expecting that Aaron's probably thinking a proposal would be part of the work that the intern would do. But makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 1 minute left. So does anyone have an urgent topic for the last minute?
Yeah, I'll grab that. This is Tim Van Steenberg from Canonical. We got an item near the bottom of the list there. Just to summarize, we deploy pure upstream Kubernetes binaries with Juju to stand up a cluster. We're in cluster Juju right now, but due to, and I'm fairly new to this, but the history that I got was that cluster was going to go away, and we were attempting to proactively move out of there into a different upstream repo, so like Kubernetes charms or something similar to that. But the process and the history of it is in those two linked forum threads, but it kind of stalled out, and I'm just looking for the right person to talk to that can help us make that happen.
What do you need exactly?
We're trying to move out of Kubernetes cluster Juju into Kubernetes/charms or a different upstream repo.
Right. Well, I guess what's blocking you though from doing that? Like, we definitely want everyone out of cluster, and
we need somebody to make the repo for us.
Okay.
That's Brian or Mike or Robert, maybe. Then.
Yeah, I think I've been talking with Brian a little bit about this, and he also is happy to have people not live in the Kubernetes org or the sort of Kubernetes namespace. So we need to sort of expand where things go. So I think part of what's blocking this is it's unclear what the path forward is in terms of where to put this code. Like, I know we're planning on moving some of the GKE code out, and we'll probably just stick it under the Google Platform org instead of under the Kubernetes org.
Cool. I suggest that we just follow this up on the email thread. I've got to run, and we're over time. So thanks, everyone, and speak to you either on Friday this week or Tuesday next week. Thanks.